Hey guys, how's it going? I'm back here with another video, and today I decided to make a simple video where I'm gonna be explaining you guys how to make kind of like it's kind of like a CRUD application, but we're actually gonna be building kind of like an HR management system. So it's nothing too complicated. This is a beginner's tutorial. So for those who know, my most popular video on my channel is where I build a CRUD application using React, Node, and MySQL. And that video I made like a long time ago. I didn't explain stuff too well. I also didn't have a microphone, so the audio is horrible. So I decided that I wanted to make something similar to that, but I'm gonna be explaining stuff better. I'm also gonna be including some stuff that are more important in this video, and I'm gonna try not to confuse most of you guys. So I hope you guys will enjoy this video. So the first thing we got to do here is you can see that we have our simple application right here. We have a web browser to our left, and this is just a simple, like I just opened VS Code and I created a folder called Simple CRUD, and I opened the project inside of here. If you've never worked with VS Code before, then I wouldn't actually recommend, like, not VS Code. If you've never worked with programming in general before, I wouldn't recommend watching this video because it is a beginner's tutorial, but it is a beginner's React and Node tutorial. So that's the basic idea. So let's start our project. In order to start our project, we're gonna come here and write new terminal, and we're actually going to be opening, and by the way, I'm going to increase the size of this for now because I know my camera is over here, so I want you guys to see my terminal. I'm going to write npx, actually no, I'm going to create two folders. So the first one is going to be client, and you can see that when I put this command over here and I write client, the folder appears to our left. And I also want to create a server folder, so server. This is how we're going to divide our application. We're going to have a client folder and a server folder. The client is going to include all of our React, part of our project. The server will include everything related to the Node and the Express part of the project. So first of all, we need to navigate towards the client folder. And you can see I'm inside the client folder by writing cd client, and now I'm inside of it. And over here, I'm going to write the simple npx create react app and a dot. That will basically create a React app in our client folder, and it will put all of the starter folders that we need. So while it's doing that, I'm going to open a new terminal by clicking on this. I could also click on the plus sign and we'll create a new terminal to our right. And you can see I'm currently inside of the client folder, but I want to go to the server folder. So I need to write cd, two dots, and I need to go to the server folder. The two dots basically brings me back. I was inside of the client folder. Now I'm back over here and I can access the server folder. Now I'm inside of it over here, and I can just write npm init. This will basically prompt a bunch of questions, and we can just press enter to all of them. Literally, it's just a bunch of questions, and now it's okay. You can see there's a package.json that appears to our left. So now that we basically created our package.json, we can install all of the different packages that we want, all of our dependencies. So in our project, the only dependencies that we actually need are MySQL, because we're going to be using MySQL, and also Express, because it is the framework we're going to be using to create our backend. So, oh, I actually wrote it wrong. So I need to write npm install MySQL and Express. Now, while it's installing, you can see that to our left, our React app just was created. So when I open this, you can see we have a bunch of folders to our left, and most of them are actually unnecessary. So what I like to do when I create a React application is I like to delete most of the stuff that are unnecessary. So for example, I'm going to delete the tests. So let me delete this. I also want to delete the logo. I want to delete the index.css, the app.test.js, and that's basically it. So I'm going to delete all of this. And now that we deleted a bunch of files, we need to delete where those files are called. So for example, we deleted the index.css. I'm just going to delete the calling for the index.css in the index.js. Let's save this. There's nothing else that we deleted that is being imported. So let's go to the app.js, and here's it has a lot of stuff. So when you create a React application, it already starts with like a basic template of a project. We're going to delete that because we're going to actually make stuff on our own. We're also going to delete the logo at the top. And if we go to our app.css, the CSS starts with a bunch of stuff. We're just going to delete everything but the first one. So that's the basic idea. Now that we kind of like set up everything, you can see that on our left, most stuff were installed. And you can see over here we can go to our package.json, and it says that Express and MySQL were installed, and that's great. So what we need to do now is we need to actually create our file that is going to be the file we write all of our code in our backend. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to create a index.js. I will call this index.js because you can see right here we set our main file to be index.js, but if you want to call it server.js or app.js, which are pretty common names that people use for this file, you can just change it over here and call the file whatever you want, but that's fine. So in the beginning, we're actually not going to start with the server. We're going to start with our React part of our application. So I'm going to come here to our terminal where we are inside of the client. So you can see right here, I'm going to write yarn start. So I'm using yarn, as you can see right here, but if you're using npm, then just write npm start. It doesn't matter, both are the same. So yarn start is going to start our application, and you can see right here, right over here, we have our React app opened. So obviously there's nothing inside of here because we haven't actually created anything, but if you came over here and we wrote like hello YouTube, we saved this, we came over here, you can see hello YouTube appears here. So that's great. I'm going to kind of do this maybe so you guys can like kind of see stuff. So yeah, this is a bit too big. Okay, let me do it like this. Okay, so basically what we got to do now is, remember, I'm planning on making an application which is like a management system. So we have some inputs that a manager in a company or whatever can basically create a user, an employee. And what they need to do is they need to actually just put the information for the employee. So they need to put a name, age, maybe, I don't know, gender, maybe, I don't know, position, also stuff like the employee ID, that kind of stuff. So when the manager puts all that information, they're going to click on a button which will basically add that information. That information is going to be sent to our database, which is a MySQL database. And when we want to see all of our employees' information, we can just click on a button, show employee information, and it's going to display a list of all the different employees that we have in our system and all the information for each of the employees. So that's the basic idea of our project. It's going to teach you guys a bunch of stuff, especially between like the connection between a front end in React and a back end in Node, also how to use MySQL. I'm going to try to teach it all for you guys. So now that we just wrote hello YouTube, we're actually going to delete this and we're going to start working on our project. So in order to do that, we're going to create our different inputs, right? So what I mean by input is this right here. So if we come here and write input and we close this, we give this a type of text. So it's just like if you're working with HTML, you'll see that this appears right here. And this is where we're actually going to be writing all of our stuff. If we want to write our name, so the name of the employee, we can just write Pedro, for example. This is what I mean by an input. So we're going to create a bunch of them. Let's just brainstorm. What do we want? We want employee, right? We want the name. So let's give it a label over here and say name. And you can see name appears. Let's also give an age. So age. By the way, age won't be text, it will be number. Why? Because age is a number. And now you can see our input. We can like have these buttons where we can increase and decrease the number. That's great, but basically that's the idea, right? So what else do we want to add? I'm not going to add gender because we can just add something like, I don't think they're allowed to ask the gender for an employee. Let's think what else. Position. So position, that's going to be text. Let's also add, what do we want to add? Maybe before position, let's add country. And that's great. We have 4 different things. Honestly, and also salary, right? Yeah, let's write here salary. And or wage. So wage. This is the wage, and it's going to be a number. Okay, this is wage, and I'm going to write over here per, actually year. So it's how much the person earns per year. So you can see it's obviously very confusing over here because we haven't installed anything, and I'm going to do a bit of CSS, but obviously nothing too difficult. It's just going to be for us to like have an idea, and it looks a little bit more appealing, you know. So we created here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different inputs, which are the 5 different pieces of information we want from the employee. And let me start styling it a bit. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a div at the top here, and it's going to be wrapping around all the inputs. And by the way, if you want to know why when I save my application, the stuff gets like aligned, I'm using an extension called Prettier. A lot of people ask me this, so it's really cool. I have a video about it. It basically aligns everything and organizes everything when you save your application. So we created a div. We're gonna give this a class name of I don't know, information, and let's open here our CSS, and over here you can see it's saying text align center. We're actually going to delete this, and what we want to do is basically we're not going to have different pages in our application. This is a simple application. At the top here we're going to have a place for the employer or the manager to put the information they want to add to the database, and over here at the bottom we're going to have a button saying show employees, and when you click on it, it's going to be displayed over here. So basically we want to have our application stacking stuff on top of each other. The manager part is over here, and here is the part where you see the information for all the employees. So in order to do that, we're going to use a display flex. And if you're not really good with CSS, don't worry, this isn't anything complicated. I would honestly recommend, if you don't care that much about CSS, just copy this, because CSS is literally something you can just like Google and copy code from Stack Overflow, so it doesn't really matter. So we're gonna write display flex, and we're gonna put flex direction of column, so that stuff are stacked on top of each other. You can see currently it just changed a bit because we haven't actually done anything yet, but I really want to justify stuff at the center. So I want to align stuff to be right at the center. So if I write justify content center, it's obviously not going to change anything for the moment, but we're going to see here, I'm going to come here to the bottom and say information. So we're going to grab the information that we wrote, and we're going to give a display flex for it as well. And we're going to do the same thing. I want to put stuff on top of each other. So let's basically flex direction, make it a column as well. So you're going to see stuff are like stuck on top of each other, and you can see it's kind of like had this effect where it's totally stretched, but we're gonna fix that. And maybe I think that's fine, right? I don't think, yeah, that's fine. So over here in the bottom we're gonna say information, and we're gonna grab the inputs. So all the different inputs inside of the information div, which is this one right here, we're gonna basically just give it a width of I don't know, 300 pixels. Maybe I don't want to make it too big. The height is going to be something like 50 pixels. I always make this too big. And let's see how it looks. Yeah, that's okay. And now let's go here. We want to justify stuff to the center, and we want to increase the width to be like with 100%. Let's see if that fixes it. It didn't. Let's just see what this div looks like. So let's add a background color just to see it. You can see that the div is over here, right? So it means it's working. But let's try align items center, and now it's working. So we're gonna center stuff in this right at the center. I'm gonna delete this, and that's fine. So let's save this, and you can see stuff are looking okay, right? It's not perfect, but it's okay. So another problem is that when we write on the input, you can see the text is really small. So we want to kind of fix that. We're going to fix that by coming here and writing font size and giving it like 18 pixels. Now it's going to increase the size a little bit more, so 20 pixels. That's okay. And let's add a bit of a padding to the left so that stuff aren't like right at the edge, you know. So let's add a 10 pixel padding. So yeah, that's fine. So we can see here we have our inputs. I don't want to make it like any more beautiful than this. It's okay. I don't really care about the visual for now. I just want to teach you guys all the logic behind making this application. So right at the bottom here, we want to add a button, right? So let's come here and add a button that is going to be just a button that will say add employee. So the button is going to be right here, and this button is going to be the button which, when we click on it, is going to send the information to the database. So let's edit it a bit by coming here and saying information button, and over here we're just going to give it an increase in width. I'm just going to give the width and the height of what we did for the inputs. So you can see it's going to be a little bit larger. We're also going to give it a margin top. So I wrote margin wrong. So margin top of like 15 pixels. Let's see how it looks. Okay, let's also give a margin top for all the, also just a margin for all the inputs, because we want to give it a bit of a space, and that's fine, right? I'm just going to increase the size, the width of the button a little bit more to like 20. Let's see if it looks, yeah, now it's better. So you can see we have a button over here. And finally, the last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to give it a hover effect, because this is kind of like something I always do, and it irritates me a bit if I don't do this. When we give it a hover effect, we just want to change the cursor, because currently when you hover over the button, your cursor is the same. We want to change it to pointer, so that when you hover it, it's now a pointer. That's just something I always do. So that's fine. This is all the CSS we're going to do for now. And we have all of our different inputs, which is great because we're basically just we're able to write stuff on our screen. However, currently we're not being able to keep that information. We're not able to store the information that we're writing here. If I write Pedro and I want to store that into a variable to send that value to our database, we're not being able to do that. So in order to do that, we're going to use something called states. And states in React is awesome. If you don't know a lot about states, I have videos about it. But basically, we can just come here and say const, and we create the name of the variable, so name, and we can say a function to change that variable called setName, for example, and we're going to write use state, and over here we can just pass an initial value. Since name is a string, we're just going to pass an empty string. We want to import the state from React, so we got to write use state and from React. So that's fine. We're importing this use state hook, and we can now use it. So honestly, state is going to be something really important in this project. If you've never worked with states before, I'm not going to go too much in depth about it, but I would recommend learning it a bit before, or else you might be a bit confused. But this is the basic idea. It's just a variable that can be changed and can be sent to our database. So let's create the state. Let's create more states because we have different variables. We are going to create 5 states, one for each variable or information we want to send. So name, we also want to change age, and we're going to change this to set age. This isn't going to be a string, so it's going to be a number, so we can just put like 0 here. It's going to start as 0. Let's also change this to country, change this to set country, and then position, set position, and finally wage. So wage, set wage. Okay, this is going to be a number as well, so 0. Okay, 0. So now we have our 5 different states that we can basically store the values that we write over here. And how do you actually do this? Well, if you've worked with React before, worked with inputs and states before, you know that in order to do that, you got to go to your input, for example, name. This is the input for name. And you're going to give it an onChange event, which will basically take a function inside of here. And that function will basically be a very simple function, which the only thing it does is it grabs whatever we currently wrote in our input, and it sets the state equal to that. So basically this onChange property over here is going to call a function every time something changes in the input. For example, if I wrote here P, it will call the function inside of here. If I wrote E, it will call the function inside of here. And what we want to do is every time there's a simple change, we just want to change the variable to whatever is the new value over here. So how do we do this? Well, we call the event. Over here we grab the event variable or argument. We pass an empty function, and over here we can just say set name equal to event.target.value. So if you're a bit confused by this, very simple. Don't worry. This just with practice you'll get this. But you'll pass an onChange event. It always have an event argument because this is an input. And over here, the only thing we're doing inside of this function is we're setting the name equal to the event.target.value. Event.target.value is the current value in the input. So currently over here, event.target.value is equal to PE. If I put a D, it's going to be PED. So that's the basic idea. And we want to do this for all the inputs. So we're going to copy this. We're going to come here to the input for age, And the only thing we're going to change is we're going to change this to set age. We're going to do the same for the one for country. Change this to set country. And let's do the same for the one for position. Change this to set position. And finally, we're going to do the same for the one for the wage. So set wage. Okay, that's fine. So we now have our different values or different variables that are storing the information that we wrote over here. If you want to be sure that we're actually doing this, well, let's do this. Let's do something cool. So we're going to create a function here really quick just so I can show you guys. It's just going to be display info. It's literally a very simple function. The only thing it's going to do is it's just going to console log the name plus the age plus the country plus the position plus the wage. It's just showing, it's just a console log. The function is basically just a console log of all the information that we currently have. So when I click on the button, it's going to display that. And in order to do that, we're just going to come here. We're going to call this function whenever we click on the button. And to make a function be called whenever you click on the button is similar to how you do it with normal JavaScript. You just give it an on-click event. And inside of here, you can put the name of the function. We called it display info, so that's fine. So let's come here so we can see. Let's inspect elements so you guys can see it. We're going to open the console. And let's just write whatever, 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 and whatever. So let's click add employee, and you can see that all the information that we wrote here are written right next to each other, but it means that we're actually storing the variable. The states are grabbing whatever we wrote over here, and they're keeping it on the variable. So that's fine, that's great, that's what we want to do. So let's delete this. That was just so you guys could see it. And now let's start working with our backend. The reason why we want to work with the backend now is because we actually set up everything to send the information from the front end, from our React app, to our backend. So we got to start working on our backend. And in order to do that, I'm going to open here our Explorer. I'm going to close our app.js. We're actually going to kind of like close our client folder for now. We're not going to be working on that for now. We're just going to open our server folder over here and go to our index.js and start from there. So in our index.js, we're just going to set up a simple Express server. How do we do that? Well, first, we got to require Express. So const Express equals require Express. Now we have an instance of the Express library, and we can just create an app from that. So const app equals to Express. And right at the bottom, we can actually start our app by writing app.listen. We want to choose a port. So this over here, as you can see, it's running on 3000. I'm going to run mine on 3001. If you're getting an error, try changing the port because maybe your port is in use. So 3001. And over here, I can pass a function to basically tell us if it's actually running or not. So it's just going to be an empty function, which at the bottom here, it's going to console.log a message. And that message is going to be, yay, your server is running on port 3001. So let's save this and let's actually check to see if it's running. To run a server in Node, the basic idea of how you do this, and I don't know if the camera is picking up this, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push this a bit to the left. This is the terminal. You can say I have two terminals. This is React and this is the Node terminal. So in order to do this, I'm going to write node index.js. And you can see it said, yeah, your server is running on port 3001. That's great because it means it's running. But how do we actually check to see if it's running? We can just come here and open up here and just write localhost 3001. And if this message appears here, it means it's working. It means it's working. I know it says cannot get / that just means it's working. So that's great. So that means our server is running. Now what we want to do is we actually want to set up our MySQL part of our project. So if you've worked with MySQL before, you probably heard about MySQL Workbench. It's a great way to visualize your MySQL database and your tables. So I would definitely 100% recommend, don't work on a database on the terminal. It's very I don't recommend it at all. So I have my MySQL Workbench over here, and I haven't actually created the database yet because I want to do it with you guys. So I would recommend, first of all, installing MySQL Workbench. It's a simple application. And when you come up with this, you're going to open the application and you're going to see that there's not none of this will appear for you. These are all mine. And in order to create a database here, you're going to come here to the left, you're going to write create schema. So let's create this and call this employee system, or employee system. I'm just going to call it like this. And let's click on apply. So apply. That means it executed an SQL statement to create the database. We're going to find the database over here. It's employee system, as you can see right here. We can click on the arrow, and you can see there's a place called tables. We haven't created any table yet, so let's create the table. You can just right click on here, click on create table, and give the table name. So let's call this employees. And let's add all the different columns we want. So the first one is going to be employee ID. So that's the ID, right? Usually we don't call this employee ID, we just call it ID, and I always do this. However, since usually on an employee system there is an employee ID, honestly I'll just call this ID actually, because this is what we usually call. We always have a column for the ID, and it's gonna be type int. And also we gotta put primary. Basically this is saying that it's a primary key, and we have to do this. And also not null, meaning that when you create a user or an employee, you have to have an ID. And finally, we want to put the check mark for auto increment, meaning that whenever we create a different employee, we don't want to set the ID. It will automatically just add one to the previous ID. You know what I mean? So if we add one employee, that one will have the ID of 1. The second employee we add will have an ID of 2. It's auto incrementing. So this is very simple, the ID part. Now we want to add the name. It's going to be let's change this to text, and let's put like 255. This is just the size of the text. I don't know. Let's just put whatever. So it's gonna be a text, and we don't want to allow an employee to be created without a name. So let's select the not null. Then yeah, that's fine. That's basically what we want to do. This is the only thing we want to add. Then we want to grab an age. An age is an int, not a text, and we also don't want to make it null. Then let's add let me grab here so we can see what else do we want. Actually, we don't even need this. We can just open this over here, and we can take a look at what we have. So age, country. Let's add a country. It's gonna be a text as well. So text 255. We can be null. Then let's say position, and let's say not null. I accidentally also added another thing over here, which is fine because we can just say wage. And it's going to be, oh, I forgot to change this to text. And let's put 255 as well. I'm putting 255. You can put whatever you want, but this is the maximum size. So I'm just putting like whatever. It doesn't really matter. I don't think there's a country with 255 characters. So let's just put whatever. So now let's add an int, because its wage is an integer, and it's also not null. So that's fine. We created everything we wanted. And in order to actually create, this hasn't created the table yet. We need to apply at the bottom here. And it's going to create, this is the SQL statement to create a table in our database, and we're going to say apply. So it executed correctly, and we're going to close over here. We're going to close this over here, and we're going to see our database. You can see that on our left here to our employee system, a new table was created. It's called employees. If you want to see all the data that is included in that table, we can just right click here and click on select rows limit 1000. So you can see it shows our table with no data in it because we haven't actually added anything inside of it. So that's great. We're going to start working with our backend now that we have our MySQL table. So let's open here our file, and let's import MySQL. So in order to import it, we can just say const MySQL equals to require MySQL. So with MySQL, you need to set up the connection to the database. And this is the part where a lot of people get errors. So I'll try to explain as much as possible so you guys can copy exactly how I do it. So you're going to create a variable called DB for a database. This is the variable you're going to use to make all the calls for your database, to insert, to delete, to whatever you want to do. And we're going to set it equal to mysql.create connection. And the create connection, we're now able to, inside of here, pass an object. So you can see I opened and closed curly braces, and this object will contain all the different information regarding our database. One of the information is basically, for example, user. You can see it even shows us, and the user usually is called root. So just put root. If you've changed the user, then that's great. I'm gonna call mine root because that's the standard. Then we want to put the host, which usually is localhost. so localhost. Then we want to add the password, and this is the part where it actually gets some errors. So usually there's two ways in which, if you downloaded MySQL Workbench for some reason, usually it's either the password, it's either just an empty password, so like this, or as in my case, it's gonna be just password. So I don't know which one is yours. Try actually not putting password. Try like this first. If it doesn't work, try password, but it should work on one of those two. Now at the bottom we want to put the database. So the database is just the name of the database that we created. We called it employee system. As you can see right here, we have to put it exactly how we called it. So let's write here employee system. So that's great. We're gonna save this, and now we have a variable called db, which is able to make all the queries. So in Node.js and Express, if you want to create a request, create an API endpoint, you can just write app for the app variable that we created over here. We can say something like post or something like get. So that's the idea, right? So let's create a post request, which is basically going to insert stuff into our database. So in order to make a post request with Express, you have to put the route. What do I mean by the route? Well, you can see here we have localhost 3001. So in our front end, when we want to make that post request, we want to call a route. And we can't just put everything in the localhost 3001 directly, because then we would only be able to do 4 things, because there's only post, get, put, and delete, right? Those are the basic ones. So we actually want to create routes. For example, if I want to create a user, or an employee, let's create a route called create. So this is a route called create, and if you want to create a user, you're going to go to your frontend and you're going to make a request to the localhost 3001/create. So that's the idea, right? So we created a route called create, and over here we have to pass 2 variables, one called rec and the other called res. If you're confused about this, basically whenever you create a request with Express, rec.res means request and response. These are the standard ones. If you want to grab something sent from the front end, for example, you use request. If you want to send something to the front end, you use response. So right here, we're just gonna, these are the arguments, and this is a function. So this is the standard syntax. And over here, we can start working with our logic. So the first thing we want to get is actually the variables sent from the front end. So you can see right here we have all of these variables in the front end, and when we make the request from our front end to our back end, we're gonna send variables. We haven't done that right now, but let's imagine we already did, because we're just gonna grab those variables. And in order to grab variables from a front end to a back end, we can just come here and, for example, create a variable called name and set it equal to rec, meaning request, dot body, dot the name of the variable sent from the front end. And when we send that variable from the front end, we want to call it name, right? I'm just going to call it name, but you could call it whatever you want. But if you call it name over here, you have to send it as name when you're sending it from the front end. So I hope I'm not getting confusing, but this is how we're going to get information from our front end. So I'm going to copy and paste 5 times, because we're going to grab an age. It's going to be age. So age, we want to grab, what else? Let me come here. We also want country. So country, and let's put country. Let's then put position, and let's put position. Then wage, finally wage, and wage. Okay, so we got our 5 variables. These are the 4 variables and like values that we're gonna send into our database. And now you might be asking, well, how do I actually send data to our, like, how do I insert stuff into our database? Well, you do it very simply by coming here, and by the way, I'm just gonna indent everything. So you can come here and just use the variable db that we created over here, write a dot query, and inside of here we can put the SQL statement. And if you've worked with SQL before, you know that to insert something into our database, we're gonna write insert into the name of the database, which is the name of the table, sorry, which, let's take a look. We called it employees. This is the name of the table. So let's call it employees, insert it into employees. And now we have to pass the columns that we want to insert. And in our case, what do we want to insert? We want to insert a column called name, a column called age, a column called country, a column called position, and one called wage. And then we gotta write values. I'm gonna increase the size of this so you guys can see. Values. And here is where stuff starts to happen. So we're saying here, we wanna insert into our employees table in the columns name, age, country, position, and wage, the values. And here we should put the value, right? But wait, you don't actually just put the value directly here because that's kind of not secure. What you usually do is you put question marks here. And I know it might look confusing, but I will show you guys what this means. We put 5 question marks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And those question marks represents the variables. Well, how do we actually use the question, like put the values that we got here into those question marks? Well, you can come here, right next to here, and you can pass an array. And this array, each element in the array will represent one question mark. So the first element in this array will be the first value, which should be the age, as you can see right here. So let's pass the, no, not the age, the name. So let's pass the name here. Then let's just put it in order. Name, age, country, position, and wage. So name, age, country, position, wage. Okay. So the idea of this is, instead of putting this variable directly into the SQL statement, we're just putting it as an array right next to it, and over here we're putting question marks. And this is great. This is a great like feature that we're able to use, and this is kind of like the standard. And over here, after we can put a comma, and right here we have to put a callback function, which basically represents what will we do after the statement is done. So usually what we do is we grab 2 variables, error and result. Error is if there's any error that occurred making the SQL statement, then the error will be displayed over here, and result is just the result of that statement. So let's create a function using these 2 variables, and over here we can just if error, meaning if there's any error, we want to console log the error. By the way, for some reason it started raining like a lot here where I live, which never rains, and I don't know if the audio is kind of like catching the rain. I hope not, but I'm just saying this is why probably there's some sounds. So if error, console log error, else just, I don't know, res.send no, actually I'm not gonna say anything. I'm just gonna say values inserted. So you might be wondering, well, what is res.send? Well, we want to end the request, right? So we can just say res.send, which will basically send like a message, or we can send variables, we can send whatever we want. We're just sending a message saying values inserted to our request, so that we know that it actually worked. So if there's an error, we're console logging it. Else, we're just sending a message saying values inserted. That's great. Now that that's done, I'm gonna leave it like this a bit, and I'm gonna be posting the code so you guys can see on GitHub. So the code is definitely on the description if you want to check it out, and that's great. So basically this is the idea, right? We created these variables and we're putting them into our database. But you might be wondering, well, now how do we send those variables to our backend? Well, we're gonna do it right now. I'm gonna open up here, and I'm gonna come here, I'm gonna close this index.js, and I'm gonna come here to our client. We're gonna be working with our React part again. So in our app.js over here, I'm gonna close this a bit. We're actually gonna be inserting a library. So I don't usually like to be using external libraries on this beginner's tutorial videos, but since we're working with requests and creating an API, this will make your life a lot easier. And it's a very famous library called Axios. If you've been on my channel before, you heard of it. So basically Axios, and I'm gonna create a terminal here. Actually, I won't. I'll just use the old terminal. So I'm gonna come here to our React terminal. Currently it's running the React, so I'm gonna write Control-C to stop running the React part so we can install the Axios library. And I'm gonna install it by basically running yarn add Axios, or npm install Axios if you want. So inside of the client folder, we're adding Axios. And what is Axios? Well, Axios is a very famous library which allows you to make requests to an API. Either it be like a public API that someone else created or your own. So that's great. Now that it installed, we're just going to yarn start again. And it's going to run over here. So now that it installed, we're going to come here and we're going to access Axios at the top. So in order to import Axios, I'm going to write import Axios from Axios. And right over here, we want to create a function, right? So Axios will just be used to make the request. So when do we want to make the request? Well, we want to make the request when we click on this button, add employee. So in order to do that, we're going to come here and say const add employee, something like this, equals to a function. And this function will be very simple. We're just going to come here. We're just going to give the button an on-click event, which when it's clicked, we want to call the add employee function. So inside of this function, what we want to do is we basically just want to make the Axios request. So let's grab Axios. We're going to make a post request because if you remember, we actually created a post request. And what we put over here is just a string which contains what is the endpoint that we want to create, that we want to make the request. Remember that we created an endpoint on our server called /create. So how do we do this? Well, we're going to grab the local host over here, and we're just going to paste it over here. And at the end, we're going to say /create because this is the endpoint that we want to make the request. Now, Axios.post, what do we do now? Remember that we're sending information from our frontend to our backend. And you might be wondering, well, where do we actually send that information? It's right over here. Well, this is considered, if you put a comma over here, this is considered the body. So we're sending a body, right? And that body is an object. So we're going to put here an object by just adding, opening and closing a curly braces. And inside of here, we can add all the different properties of that object. So that's the body. So what are the properties we want? Well, we want a name, which the value is the name variable that we have over here. We want an age, which again, same thing. It's the age variable. We want a country, which is the country. And I'm going to save this so it becomes more clear for you guys. Then we want, I'm going to open this a bit. Then we want position, which is a position. Then we want a wage, which is a wage. And that's fine. So if you're kind of confused, just think about this. This is an object, which is the body object. And we're sending this object to the backend. And inside of there, we want to have a key value pairs. So basically, this is the key name. And for the key name, we want to pass the value name, which is the variable we have over here, the state. We want to do this for all the variables so that when we come here to our backend in our index.js and we say, well, we want to create a variable called name, which is equal to rec.body.name. Now body is an object which contains the name. As you can see right here, we created a property name inside of the body. And that property now has the value name, which is the state we created over here. So we're passing our value to our backend. That's great. So let's save this. And by the end, like right at the end of the post request, since this is a promise, and if you're confused with promises, this is probably a great opportunity to learn it. It's very simple. Basically, we don't know when the request is done. So we can just say .then, meaning that our whole function will stop until the request is done, until the Axios.post request is done. And then we want to basically, I don't want to even grab the response. We're just going to kind of for now, console log. We're going to pass a function here, which is going to console.log success. So that's fine. So you can see we're making a post request. We're sending to this endpoint. We're sending this information, and then we have a callback function basically, which is just a console log of the word success. So that's fine. We're gonna save this. Let's come here to our index.js. By the way, I've never I usually use a package on our backend called NodeMon. I'm not gonna use NodeMon in this video. I have videos talking about NodeMon. I don't want to complicate stuff, but basically every time you make changes to your index.js to your server, you have to run it again. So let's come here to our terminal for the server, and I'm gonna open this terminal a bit so you guys can see it better. Let's just push this a bit so you guys can see it. Over here, I'm gonna close the terminal by writing the Control C, and then over here I'm going to write node index.js again, and now it's going to run again, and there weren't any errors, so that's great. We're going to come here, and now we're going to try sending the information to our database. You've seen our database, it's empty, so let's try it again. Let's add an employee called Pedro Machado, that's my name. I'm gonna put my age here, 19. We're gonna add my country, Brazil. I'm gonna add my position, I don't know, full stack developer. My wage, I really hope to make, I don't know, I'm gonna put something crazy like $800,000 a year. So 1, 2, 3. Let's imagine I'm making like $800,000 a year. I'm gonna click add employee. So there was an error, and this is great. I always forget to do this. You're gonna probably encounter this error too, and you might be wondering, well, why is this happening? Well, the reason why this is happening is because we haven't added cores, and we're gonna add cores right now. So basically, what cores is just a library it's just an idea. Like if you're making a request from your front end to the backend from your own API, like from your own front end to an API to your own API, you need to allow it by using cores. So let's install cores right here. I'm gonna again open up my terminal here for the server. I'm going to close the server that is running by pressing Control C. Then I'm gonna write npm install cores. It's gonna install cores. And now that installed, I'm gonna come here to the top. I'm gonna write const cores equals to require cores. By the way, if you're confused by cores, don't worry. I was confused. I was very confused for like the first 10 months until I started learning more about networking. Don't worry at all. This isn't really important. Just know that this is something you always need to do. You need to write app.use cores. And now this error is fixed. You're now able to make requests from your front end to the backend. So let's save this. We're going to run our server again by node index.js. We're going to push this to the left here. And since our information is since this was an error with your backend, we weren't even able to make the request because of cores. But now that cores is installed, we can just click on the add employee again. We don't need to refresh our front end or anything because all the changes we made were in the backend. So let's try clicking add employee again. And we can see we have an error, and that's great because I can show you guys what kind of errors we're gonna get. So let's look at the error here. You can see what's console log. It said cannot read property name of undefined. Well, apparently name is undefined. So this over here is undefined. Let's take a look to see what happened. Well, something is great. It means that the request was made, but apparently name is undefined, which is weird. So it's on the, no, it's not here actually, is it? No, it's in the 16. Yeah, it's over here. So name is undefined. This means that we made a mistake here by sending name. Let's see what we made. Well, let's first of all console log a name. So let's say console log name to see if we're actually grabbing the word name. So let's click add employee. And yeah, we actually have the value Pedro Machado to our left. So that means we're actually grabbing the word name. So why is it not working? Well, let's take a look. Name, we're passing the value here. That's correct. Okay, exit the post, that's correct. It should be working. I'm setting name. Let's console log name over here. So console log, actually let's console log the rec.buddy. So we can see the object that we're getting from our front end. So let's come here and let's refresh this. Let's come here to our React and let's click add employee again. We're gonna see what is console logged in our server. Well, apparently, was there anything console logged? Let's look at the top. Oh, we made a change to our backend. We haven't actually restarted our server. So let's restart our server by writing node index.js again. So let's make the request, add employee. Let's look at the top here. You can see it said undefined, meaning we're actually not sending the body to our from our front end to our backend. Well, I don't actually know why this is happening. I'll figure it out and I'll be back when I figured it out to explain to you guys. Hey guys, I'm back. This was a very stupid mistake. I for some reason forgot this. I already forgot this like in other videos, and it's something I'll probably always forget, but I know what the error is. I just need to apply the JSON middleware so that when we send information from the front end, we actually parse the JSON. And that might be sounding kind of confusing, but I'll explain to you guys. The only fix is just coming here and writing app.use express.json. So .json. That should fix everything. So let's restart our server here by writing Control-C, running our server again. And now I'm positive that this will work. Yes, so it worked. You can see here it says success, and that means that apparently a request was made, right? So let's take a look at our database to see if the data was inserted. In order to make you can see we selected all from our employee system when we clicked on select roles, right? So if we want to call it again, we can just click on this kind of like a lightning bolt over here. We can just click on it, and you can see that now our data is in our database. That means a bunch of stuff. It means our request is working. It means we're getting the information from the front end. It means that our database connection worked when we clicked over here. So this worked. And if you got to this point, it means that a lot of stuff has worked for you. So now what we have to do is basically just work a little bit more, and we should be done with this. This is the hardest part we have passed, because this is the hardest part is setting up stuff without getting errors. So now that we're able to send information from our backend to our frontend, we want to see that information, right? So how do we see it? Well, we're going to come here to our app.js, to our basically our server, our frontend here. And what I want to do is I just want to add a line break, so we kind of have like a division, so we can see, like, you can see this is basically what I'm adding. Well, what happened? Did I do something wrong? Let me refresh this. Okay, maybe I won't add a line break. I just wanted to add something here. Let me try to, if I did something like this, let me see if it appears. Okay, yeah, this is not what you should do, but I'm just gonna put a bunch of lines here so you have an idea of like this is a different place, right? Okay, so this is what we're doing, right? This is our project, and over here at the bottom we want to have a button which is going to say show employees. When we click on that button, it's going to show all of our employees in our database and the information for each employee. So how we're going to do that is we're going to come over here. We're just going to come over here. We're going to create a button, right? We're going to write here button, and in this button is going to say show employees. So show employees. This button is over here. When you click on this button, you should be able to show all the employees. So that's great. And how do we actually show the employees? By the way, I don't like that it's kind of like spaced out. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to come here and I'm going to remove this information.button. I'm just going to like apply this to all the buttons in the screen. So it's the same button you can see right here, right? So over here, what I want to do is I want to kind of add a div around this button thing over here. And I'm going to decrease this a bit. I'm going to increase this a bit as well. We're going to add a div to wrap this. So div, and over here we're going to give this a class name. This class name is going to be employees. So we're going to come here to our app.css. We're just going to say employees, and it's fine because we can just say now display flex. Then we want to give it a flex direction. Actually, the flex direction, it's already fine. We're just going to align items to the center. Okay, and the width, we want to make it 100%. Okay, so is it aligned? Let's give a background color. So aqua, let's see. Yeah, it's working now. So basically what we want to do is we want to also justify content center maybe. Let's see what it does, because yeah, now in this case it's working. Oh, I actually get what it means. We need to add the flex direction, right? Flex direction column. Okay, now it's working. We have centered everything. Let's change the background color. And now we have a button right here. When we click on this button, we just want to display a list of all the employees, and each employee should have the information for like the employee, right? So let's see how we can do this. Let's close the app.css, and over here, let's create a function, right? Or state, actually. We're going to create a state called employee list. So to create a state, we can just say here employee list, and it's going to take an set employee list function, and it's going to be equal to use state, and it's going to be an array or a list. So our initial value over here, it's going to be just an empty array. So what does this employee list state does? Well, when we make our request, we want to get all of the information we currently have in our database. and we're going to store all that information in a list. And then we're going to display that list over here. That's the basic idea. Well, how do we get that information from the database? Well, we're going to come here. We're going to say const get employees. It's just a function we're going to create. And in this function, we're going to make a Nexus request. So let me grab this. And obviously, we're not going to be sending anything. We just want to get all the employees in the database. So let's remove this. And also, it's not going to be a post request. It's going to be a get request. So get access.get. And we haven't created the endpoint yet, but we're going to fix that. So basically, we want to change this to get employees. So let's just create an endpoint called employees. It's going to be localhost 3001/employees, and it's going to be a get request. And at the .then, differently from the at employee, when we add something to the database, we don't want to receive anything, right? We're just adding stuff. But this time, we actually want to receive. We want to get a response. So on the .then, we can just say response. We're going to get a response. And this variable right here, response, will contain whatever we send from our backend. So that's the idea. Right now, let's just console log the response. So that's fine. And at the button right here, we want to give it an onClick event. OnClick, and we're going to pass the get employees. Okay, so when we click on this button, we want to get the employees from our backend. We haven't created this endpoint yet though, so let's do it right now. Let's go to our index.js, and you can see we have here our post request. Let's change that and let's create one which is a get request. So app.get, and remember the endpoint we created was /employees, so we can just say /employees. And over here, we want to do the same thing. So res and a function. Remember, this is standard for when you're creating a request using Express. So we're not sending anything from our front end. We just want to receive stuff. We just want to receive everything from our database. So we don't need to do all of this because we're not actually sending anything. But we actually need to do this. So how do we do this? We're just going to come here and say db.query. And if you've worked with MySQL before, you know that in order to select everything from a database, from a table, you can just say select all. So this asterisk means all from the name of the table, which is employees. This is literally what we want to do. And we're not going to actually pass any array with variables because we're not sending like any variable to the request. We're just asking, well, we want to select everything from the employees. So that's fine. But we actually need to do something here. We want to do the last thing, which is just passing the error and the result function. So how do we do this? I'm going to come here and say error result, just like we did before. And it's just a function, which if there is any error, if errors, then we want to console log the error. So console.log error, and else. This time we're actually going to do something with the result. Remember that I said that res.send values inserted sent this information from the backend to the frontend with a message saying values inserted. Well, this time we might want to send more information. We actually want to send the result from this request. So what we can do is we can just say here res.send, or we can just use res.json too. This is another way to do it. I'm just going to say res.send. We're going to send result. So we're going to make this request to our database, select all from employees. Then we're going to, if there isn't any error, we're going to send this result. So let's save this. Let's come here. And by the way, since we made a change to our backend, we can come here to our terminal. We have to close our terminal and run node index.js again. Now it's running. And now let's come here and it should be working. Everything should be fine. You can see we're console logging the response. So let's check this. Let's open up this. And oh my god, this looks super ugly. So I'm just going to remove this. It's just that for some reason the HR tag is not working. So let me check this. HR. Yeah, it's not working for some reason. Yeah, that's fine though. I'm just going to ignore this. We just have a button here saying show employees. That's fine. So what we want to do is we want to basically just click on this button and see what happens. So let's open our console log. Remember that we're just console logging the response from this request. So let's check our console log to see if we click on this button, it will show the data in our database, which currently is just Pedro Machado, 19, Brazil, full stack developer, and 800K. So let's click on this. you can see that we made a request. This is the response. It's an object which contains a bunch of stuff. One of the stuff that contains is basically the configuration, which is just a bunch of random stuff. You don't need to worry. You actually don't need to worry about anything. Rather, like the only things you need to worry about is the status, meaning that if it's to 100, it means it's worked. And the data. The data is what we received from our backend. So if I click on here, you can see we received an array, which only has one element because we just have one row in our database containing all the information we want. So everything about Pedro is over here. So that means it's working. We're making the correct request. And now we just want to display our users in our front end. But before we actually do that, I want to add some more fake data to our database because I just want to have a list. It's currently just one user. So let's check. I want to add a John, I don't know, John Fish, whatever, age, 29, country, Germany. That's not a name for a German person. But position, web, UX, actually UX, wage, 100K. And I'm going to click add employee. Let's check if this works. Let's check again. It worked. John Fish was inserted. Let's change this. Let's add Jessica Barnes, age 22, from the I don't know, Colombia. Again, not a name for, I don't know. Actually, I don't know if that's a name for a Colombian person. UX. I'm just gonna say no. I'm not gonna say UI. I'm gonna say front end, and the wage will be 500K. 1, 2, 3. Add employee. Let's check again. The employee was added to our database. That means it's working. Let's check if we're getting the information, the correct information again. Let's click on show employees. We got the request, and now it's an array with 3 different people. So that means everything is working. Let me refresh the page. Everything is working, and that's fine. So now we got the information. How do we display this information in our screen? We want to display it, right? So, well, in order to do that, we're going to come here to our button. We're going to add a JavaScript variable inside of our JSX. And if you've worked with React before, you know that in order to render a list in your page, you have to do it like this. You want to grab the list, so employee list. You want to pass the .map function. And inside of this .map, you open and close the parentheses. You open and close parentheses again. And inside of here, you can grab a key and a value, right? So value, key, and you can pass a function inside of here. So this is the idea, right? Don't get, like, I know it's a bunch of curly braces and parentheses, but if you want to copy this, just take a look. Also, I have the code. But basically, we're mapping through every element in the employee list, and we want to return a div. So just a div, which contains the information. So div, and it's just a div. And inside of here, I want to put, for now, let's just put the variables we want to see. So for example, what is value? Well, remember that every element in our list, in our employee list, should be an employee. But an employee is an object because it contains a name, an ID, an age, a country, a position, a wage. It contains all this stuff. So val is actually the object for the current element in the array. So it's a current employee. So since it's an object, we can just say val.name, and it's going to display a name, for example. So let's see if that works. And actually that won't work for now because we actually haven't inserted anything into our list. We are just console logging the response. So how do we insert stuff into our list? How do we convert the values that we received from our backend into the list for the employees we have in our React? Well, I can just say here set employee list equal to response.data. Why .data? Because if you remember, response contains a bunch of information, including a property or a key called data, which inside of that key contains the array of employees. So we're setting our employee list equal to the response.data, meaning it's all correct. So let's save this. And now if we click on show employees, you should see all of our employees beautifully appearing down here. But let's do a little bit more. This we can just come here and say, I don't know, val.name. We're gonna kind of style it a bit. We're gonna add a class name, and that class name is going to be employee. I know we have an employees. We're just gonna call this employee. I know it might be confusing, but just get it. It's employee and employees. So val.name. Then we want to add maybe so we want to change it a bit. We're gonna add all the different labels. Actually, let's add headers. So h3 oh, I did this wrong. So h3, it's going to be a header. Inside of here, we want to add the name, so vol.name, and then we want to add another h3. Let me save this so you guys can see it. We have a header here, and we want to add more information, right? We want to add all the other information too. So vol.name, vol.age, vol.country, I think, vol.position, and let's add a final one, vol.salary. No, it's not salary, it's wage, sorry, wage. Okay, so you see, it's appearing here, it's all fine. Let's edit the div a bit, so let's come here to our app.css, and inside of here, let's say .employee, and a .employee will basically allow us to access this div right here, so this over here, everything here. So let's make it a little bit, it look a little bit better. So how do we do that? Let's add a width of like, I don't know, 700 pixels and a height of like 400 pixels. I don't know if that's going to be too small. So, and let's add a background color for now. Something very simple. Let's add Azuri. Let's see how it looks. So you can see, no, that looks horrible. Let's add a light gray. If it looks bad, I don't care that much. It still looks bad. Okay, I'm not gonna add a background color. I'm just gonna add a border. Okay, border of 1 pixel, solid and black. Okay, that's what I usually do. It's just a border. The height is huge, so let's fix this. Let's make this 180, and that's fine. And now let's also add a margin to all of this. So margin 10 pixels. So they're kind of like spaced out. And you can see that currently this appears right here. That's fine. You know why? Because we're actually going to divide this. We're going to give this a display flex. We're going to put them right next to each other. And we're going to maybe add a padding as well. Padding of 10 pixels. So it's kind of like to the side. We're going to grab each H3. So you can just come here and say employee H3. And each A3 will have definitely a margin of like 20 pixels. I want to put them spaced out. And then finally, what I want to do is I want to come right here. This is the name, right? I don't want to just display the name. I want to display the word name and then the name. So we actually, this is the HTML. This is the JSX. So we can write name here. And when we open and close the curly braces, we're putting JavaScript. So when I say name, then open and close curly braces and say vol.name, we're saying name and the variable. So that's fine. We can do the same thing for the other ones. So let's change this to age. Let's change this to country. Let's change this to maybe position. And I know this isn't perfect at all because this video is already too long, so I probably won't have that much time to make it perfect. But then what we want to maybe do is we want to maybe not make this a header. Let's just make this maybe a paragraph. So let's see how it looks. So let's say P. Okay, let me fix this. So P, and I'm going to put a comma here. So let's see how it looks. It looks the same, so I'm not even going to bother with this. I'm just going to remove this right here. So this is basically what we have right now, right? It's not perfect, obviously, not even close to being perfect because it looks horrible. I'm going to try to make it a little bit better, but it doesn't really matter at the end. Let me just say font family. The point of this video was just showing functionality. I have other videos with UI. I'm going to give this a monospace so it looks a little bit better. It doesn't. I'm going to make this career new. Okay, looks a little bit better. And yeah, that's the basic idea, right? You can see we have all of our different users. I'm going to decrease this to like, actually, I'm just going to make this auto. Let's see how it looks. Auto. Yeah, it looks a little bit better already. So this is the list. If we want to add a new user, we're going to see here, right here. We can come here and say Fernanda, whatever, James. This isn't even a name. So let's put, she's 5 years old. She's from Cambodia. I probably wrote that wrong. It's Cambodia, right? Yeah. Position, she's CEO. Wage, 2 million or whatever. So let's click add employee. We clicked add employee. Let's see the employee. Show employee. Bah. And now the Fernanda James from Cambodia is down here. So that's great. If you want to add, when you add the employee, you just want to see it directly appearing here instead of just having to click show employees. Well, we can fix that. So something that is really cool is the fact that we can use array destructuring to add elements to the database automatically. So how do we actually do that? Well, we can come here to our, and this is probably the last thing I'll show in this video because this video is already probably more than a 1 hour long, video. But I can show you guys more stuff. I can make another video just continuing this, in which I can show you guys how to delete stuff and directly delete it. When you click delete, the element will be deleted from the database and also deleted from the list. I can also show you guys how to update stuff automatically, so that's great. But for now, let's just fix it like this. So I want to add the element to the list and to the database at the same time without having to click on show employees. How do I do that? Well, when you say add employee, after you add the employee, we can just come here, instead of saying console logging success, we can just say set employee list. Then we gotta pass an array. Then we've gotta say employee list, 3 dots. Wait, what happened? Let's just pass actually 3 dots, employee list. Then over here, we can say that we can pass the new value. And this might be confusing to you, and I'm just gonna pass this object right here. This might be confusing to you, but don't worry. It's confusing for everyone. It's called array destructuring. So it's basically we're adding the value to an array without using the push method, which is how you usually do it. And this is how you add new values to an array in React. So let's see if that works. If I want to change her name to or let's actually just add a guy, John Hopkins, and age 9, US. It's a CEO as well. Let's just write add employee. You'll see that a new employee was automatically added, and it is John Hopkins. It means it's working. It means that we're actually sent that to the database as well. So if you come here, you'll see that John Hopkins appears in the database, so that's great. And that means everything is working. So that's great. This is how you basically do it. There's many different ways of doing this kind of project. This is just a simple introduction to how to work with React, MySQL, and Node. I've made videos about this in the past, but I really thought that I didn't explain stuff well. I also had a pretty bad audio, so I really wanted to make a new video for this. So yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed it. If you really want to see the parts where I delete stuff, I edit stuff, edit an employee information, I can definitely do that. So that's great. I can make that video too. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please leave a like down below. Comment what you want to see next. Subscribe because I'm posting every single day. Like today, I just made this 1 hour long video, and I'm in university, so I have a lot of work, so I'm putting a lot of effort into this channel, and I really appreciate it if you guys could subscribe or like the video or just share it to your friends or whatever, and I would really appreciate that. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I see you guys next time.